My Lords, I beg leave to ask a question standing in my name on the order paper, and in so doing declare a non-financial interest as the patron of Hong Kong Watch.
My Lords, as my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, said, we will not tolerate any attempts made by the Chinese authorities to intimidate individuals in the United Kingdom. Let me be absolutely clear. Hong Kong's national security law has no jurisdiction here. As the noble Lord will be aware, we suspended our extradition agreement with Hong Kong indefinitely in 2020. We continue to call on Beijing and Hong Kong to end the targeting of those who stand up for freedom and democracy.
My Lords, as always, I'm grateful to the noble Lord for his response to this question, but, my Lords, with bounties of $1 million Hong Kong dollars now on the heads of 8 exiled Hong Kongers, with 1,200 pro-democracy activists and advocates incarcerated in Hong Kong, including the British citizen Jimmy Lai, with 7 parliamentarians, 2 from your Lordship's House, sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party, how can the noble Lord the Minister justify the government's decision to send a trade minister from your Lordship's House recently to Hong Kong to deepen business ties? And how does he respond to the calls last night from his noble friend, Lord Patton of Barnes, and the noble and learned Lord, Lord Faulkner of Thoroton, calling on the remaining British judges to withdraw from the Hong Kong courts rather than giving them the thin veneer of respectability?
My Lords, on the noble Lord's second point, of course, the noble Lord will be aware that we've been very critical of the fact that the justice systems in Hong Kong are not what they are as per the agreement that was signed with the United Kingdom government when we seized our control of Hong Kong. Individual judges, and many judges have made key decisions, and we hope again that those who are still operating in Hong Kong will continue to view their own status, their own professional standing as well, in light of decisions they make for the future. On the first point that the noble Lord said, of course we recognise the issue of those who have been sanctioned. That's why my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, recently also met with those British parliamentarians who have been sanctioned, and those meetings will continue. We're also aware the noble Baroness Kennedy highlighted the issue of the recent warrants again issued to people within the United Kingdom, and that's why I think it's important to emphasise the point of the suspension of that extradition treaty. And on the third element of the trade minister's visit, of course we have relations with China. We continue to have diplomatic relations. I've said before from the dispatch point, we have many disagreements with China. I'm the human rights minister. We've campaigned and led the charge, for example, on statements on Xinjiang, which I'm very grateful for the noble Lord's input into. But equally, we recognise there are key global issues where China does have a role to play, and in that engagement's important. And when we have engagement on the trade side, my noble friend Lord Johnson also raised the important issues of human rights quite directly and publicly during his visit.
My Lords, I think it probably is time for the remaining British judges to withdraw from Hong Kong. I think that's in the Minister's mind as well. But of course, although the British never offered full democracy to Hong Kong in its time, at least we didn't go around hunting the very distinguished pro-democracy campaigners and putting bounties on their head and trying to arrest them in the middle of the night. Would he nudge his colleagues to remind again their Chinese counterparts that if China wants to be treated ever seriously as a civilized nation, then it has to behave in a less civilized, in a much more civilized and less thuggish way?
My Lords, I agree with my noble friend, and it's important that if China wishes to sustain and strengthen, indeed, the position of Hong Kong on the global stage, that it not only adheres to what it previously itself was a signatory to, it also recognises that there are important elements in recognising the vibrancy of any financial centre. I spent 20 years in the financial services sector and dealt extensively with areas both in China and Hong Kong. But one of the points we need to emphasise as a government is to ensure the vibrancy of a financial centre is also protected through the transparency of justice systems and the very transparent application of laws. The national security law in China is set up to intimidate, prosecute and indeed arrest and detain. innocent individuals. Jimmy Lai's example is just one of them. And I assure the Noble Lord we'll continue to make that case very forcefully, directly and bilaterally to the Chinese administration, as well as those in authority in Hong Kong.
My Lords, as your Lordships know, along with David Alton, Lord Alton, I've been sanctioned now by the Chinese, and it's not just myself, but my whole family. And the long arm of China is something that we have to be very conscious of. It's now described by lawyers internationally as transnational suppression. That many nations are now doing this, which is that their reach goes beyond their own borders when they oppress their citizens. We've seen it with Russia, we've seen it with Iran, and we're seeing it with China. And what concerns the young people who live in this country, who are Hong Kongers, is that they might not be able to travel. They're fearful that in transit they will be arrested by less hospitable and human rights concerned nations and actually transported back to either Hong Kong or China in order to be prosecuted. So the safety of those people who've had these bounties placed on their heads is very serious and real. And we have to remember that police stations, there was one set up in Glasgow where arrests could be made and intimidation applied to people who have settled in this country because of their fears. So I ask the Noble Minister, who I know is very sensitive to all of this, what is the government doing in its conversations with China, with the leaders in Hong Kong? And why aren't some more of them put on those Magnitsky lists, those targeted sanctions lists? I really do want to hear what it is that government does when it meets with Chinese officials.
My Lords, first of all, I know directly from our conversations, and I'm grateful to the Noble Lady for her valuable insights. But equally, I know the great challenge it's imposed on many colleagues, both in this House and the other place. Indeed, there are members of His Majesty's government who are now ministers, who are also based on and are subject to the sanctions that the Noble Lady has listed. On the issue of future Magnitsky sanctions, as I said, across the piece, I'm proud of our record. We will continue to look at all our levers to ensure that those who commit egregious abuse of human rights are held to account. On the specific issues on transnational issues, my right honourable friend, the Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, who himself has experienced the impact of sanctions, has been directly defending the Democracy Task Force to review our UK's approach to transnational repression in this respect, and specifically with China and Hong Kong. Let me be very clear. There's three major asks we do consistently. We call on Beijing to remove the national security law. That has to happen. We consider China to be in an ongoing state of non-compliance with the Sino-British Joint Declaration, and that is why we suspended our extradition agreement. We continue to work with other partners, including other agencies such as Interpol, to ensure there are no abuses of these transnational, international agencies as well.
My Lord, what steps will the government take, specific steps, to work with its international partners to protect those 8 individuals?
My Lords, we do work with our international partners, but also ensuring that our own record in defending those who are attempted to, particularly those who are under UK jurisdiction, are fully protected. Where individuals who may be at heightened risk are provided with full support, including deploying protective security guidance and other measures where necessary. I won't go into the details specifically, but I assure we work with key partners as well to ensure that these protections are afforded not just in the United Kingdom, but also, as has been indicated by 2 Noble Lords, about their own concerns when they travel internationally and that of their families.
I welcome the Noble...
My Lords, may I thank the Noble Lord the Minister for his answers, but would you not agree with me that this case is yet further evidence for the revisionist tendencies of the Chinese government when it comes to human rights? And this tendency is only going to be intensified as China tries to use its economic and political muscle to mute its critics. So doesn't it underscore the importance of His Majesty's government working tirelessly to revive the spirit of universality that originally inspired the human rights project in upholding core rights and freedoms?
My Lords, what the Right Reverend Prelate relates, of course, I agree with him, and I assure the Noble Lord, China is a member of many international organizations, including a P5 member of the United Nations. It continues to subscribe to many of the key charters of these organizations, including the UN, and what the Right Reverend Prelate has related is very much part of their alignment with these. We need to keep making the case. The issue of economic dependence on many countries across the world is very, very clear. And that economic dependency extends not just to a 5-year or 10-year period, it's often into a generation. And we need to ensure there are alternatives. It's not enough to just say that we are standing up for the principles and the sometimes disabling effect of some of the quite eye-watering deals which are done. We need to ensure that we work with key partners to offer quite coordinated and alternative responses for long-term infrastructure and development in key parts of the world.
My Lords, that concludes oral questions for today.